Hello. Hello, my friends. I'm Holly Elisa Bruno, and I'm so glad to be with you. It's the last, oh my goodness, how can it be? The final July Monday. I tell you, in 2024, July is my favorite month of the year. And I live now in a part of America called New England. And it's a wonderful place with lots of old poets and poetry, and it's a beautiful place. And yet, and it's kind of cold here in the winter. It's so cold here in the winter that we have this humor that we make fun of the things that bother us. So Robert Frost was good at that. Here's one of the things that everyday people say, like me. There are two seasons in New England, July and the rest of the year. I think in the Midwest, people say there are two seasons in Minnesota, road repair season and the rest of the year. So the truth is, I love me some July. And what I'd like to talk with you about today as we gather on the topic of trauma survivors walking each other home, which was 4 years ago called Happiness is Running Through the Streets to Find You, Translating Trauma's Harsh Legacy into Healing. Look, we meet every week, and this week it's me. Often I have Denise with me or another friend with me. People join us, but now it's me. And that's meant to be. So let's have a good time with it. It is the end of July, 2024. I am 78 and a half years old. How old are you? Now, that's not supposed to be a question we ask women, right? But I have always not, I've never agreed with that statement that women, the assumption, the judgment that women shouldn't say how old we are. What am I covering up? What am I covering up? Well, look, I wore lipstick. I'm covering up pale lips. What the hey? That's a choice. But I choose not. I choose not to cover my age. I never have. Perhaps because I was the youngest, because I skipped a grade when I started school. I just went right straight into first grade at age 4. And I just got used to being the youngest person. I was the youngest in my family. I was often the youngest in organizations. However, now I'm the oldest. And it's a wonderful opportunity to look at this way that time has given me an opportunity to look at both things, looking up as the youngest and then looking, I don't then you say down, but looking back at my life and saying, "Ooh, I've been on earth 7 and almost 8 decades. How can this be?" Well, let me get clear what we're doing here today as I get clear with you. Look, we gather, we talk about how trauma survivors can live our lives in a way that's true. And true to me means, how can I live my life in a way that's fulfilling? There's a cliche that says happy, joyous, and free, but I don't think I can always be happy and joyous. I like it when I am, but I can't always be that way. Free, that is a choice I can make. I can make a choice to be free. And am I saying that with white privilege as I think of all the stuff going on across the world? Perhaps I am. Perhaps there's part of that I feel like I can gain freedom. But I listen to all the great writers too, all the people of color, James Baldwin, all of the people who've, Ralph Ellison, people who've written about, like being invisible and what it's like. How do we claim our souls in the midst of being thrown away because we're defective, because we're dark, because we're different? How do we reclaim our souls? And that is always the promise of a trauma survivor, that the individual inside of my soul relationship I have with myself, with the divine in me, that's something that's always there for me. And I knew from the time I was a small child that if I could just be in the presence of beauty, in the presence of nature's rhythms, I would be okay. There were times as an adult when I'd be in a big city and I'd feel so invisible. so unseen, so unheard, so and that meant being in danger, because that meant being vulnerable. And let me explain that. I am an incest survivor. I am a physical abuse survivor, spiritual abuse, moral abuse, emotional abuse, psychological abuse, all kinds of abuse is what happens to children in very troubled families. And because I was on scene, I think people thought I didn't exist. So they could do anything that they wanted to me. And they did. And I could have been the victim. And I was. I think children are victims of adults that don't have boundaries and don't take responsibility for ourselves. And yet at the same time, I think that a child does not have to wait to grow into adulthood to choose to be a living person rather than a victim, or an actor rather than a reactor. I don't think a child has to wait to become an adult to say, okay, I get it now. I can make a choice. I think children can make that choice because I knew if I could just go, there it is, get out of the situation I was in, I would find my way and I would be okay. And so every day, winter, summer, fall, all you got to do is just call on the outside. And that's what I would do. I would get outside and I would be fascinated. Things would fascinate me, even going out the same door. Something was different. I mean, Heraclitus got it right. Can't put my foot in the same stream twice. Well, guess what? Can't go out the door the same way. It was the same back door. Well, guests came in the front door. The family came in the back door. So it was the same back door, closed in the same way, it opened in the same way. But over the years, it changed. It needed new hinges. Over the years, the surroundings changed. Over the seasons, my mother's favorite color was pink. And she adorned herself in it. And her little pink rose bush, which was a miniature, sometimes it would be blooming, sometimes it would be little thorns. So what I'm saying here is, even for children, maybe especially for children, blessed are the children, even children can get it that we have choices to recover from the pain. Now, here's the problem and the gift. The gift is things might be awful inside, but I could just get up and no one really gave a sweet bippy where I was. So I could just get up, go outside. As long as I was back in time for dinner, it was assumed I was okay. I do not remember anybody ever coming looking for me, even when I was away for a whole day. I mean, I was probably smart enough to tell people, okay, I'm going I'm going on a bike hike. I'll be back tonight. Or I'm going to pick blackberries. I'll be back by dinner. Or I'm going, I'm just going on a hike. I just don't remember having anybody concerned about where I was going to be when. And that is, you see, every one of the tortures of being abandoned and lost as a child, not wanted as a child, every one of the tortures, if I reflect and let the sunlight in so that I can see the shadows and the light, every one of those has a blessing in it. If that sounds too religious for some folk, every difficulty, if I look at it and not twist it, but just look at it, let it tell me. Every difficulty has some beauty. Once I caught on that as a neglected child that was on scene, man, I could take off. I had such freedom. And freedom meant choices. And choices meant I could wander all over the hills, the valleys, go to the river. I could go wherever I wanted. And no one would notice. And so I could be free. And there was the freedom. And free to do what? Free to explore, free to find out, free to have an adventure, free to observe and notice and have questions. Now, the difficult thing was that I didn't have people that would take the time to answer questions for me. So I had a gyroscope. You know, anybody, children never play with them anymore. It fascinated me. It was this sort of mechanical globe that would spin. And once it got spinning, it just kept going. It just kept going. And it had a movement to it. And it would keep going. And I wanted to understand, how can something just keep going? How does that happen? And no one, and I still don't know, but I will know before I leave this earth. So, my friends, let me step back and say, yes, we gather every week and we talk about the issues and challenges and promises and hopes and solutions and just plain old daily tips on how to be a trauma survivor and reclaim our lives. And I also want you to know that if anything I say at any point in this program disturbs you, or as is often said, triggers a flashback, or if not a memory, a bodily experience of a fear or terror or being out of control or being unsafe, if anything like that happens, and it's not our fault when it happens, it just happens. It doesn't mean we have to be controlled by it either. It just happens that in the midst of something, I can get scared. Yeah, I can get scared. I can say, oh my God, I can't remember anything. The older we get, at least the older I get, one of the things I do is realize, oh my God, I'm probably not going to be able to remember that person's name. It almost always comes back to me, but the fear intervenes. And that's a big part of what being a trauma survivor is. Having faced a trauma is a life-threatening event, or in my case, not just one life-threatening event, but a series of traumatic, which is to say, life-threatening, annihilating, terrifying, get me out of here. Oh my God, this can't really be happening. Events that they're so scary that this brain in here has had 78 and a half years of responding by surviving. And the challenge, and that's what trauma survivors have in common. We have the brain that knows how to survive, or we wouldn't be here today. We would not have survived, but we did. I did. If my brain has been shaped, formed, altered by trauma, how can I say, all right, that's what happened. That's what I've got. What can I do to claim a life which is not determined, controlled by, in obeisance? That's not obedience only. In obeisance, like bow down to trauma. If I don't want to have a life that's defined by trauma, how can I look at what's going on inside of me? Poets and philosophers, writers, songwriters, jokesters, jesters, people who stop to take perspective, take a sounding on our lives. We've always had a way of understanding the pain of this frozen brain. But today, 2024, we call it frozen brain. Well, we didn't even know decades, centuries, eons ago that we had this thing called a brain. But what we knew is that we had trouble inside of ourselves. And the trouble inside of ourselves, one of the worst myths that I can recall about trouble inside of ourselves is, well, there are two. One is Sisyphus. Remember, Sisyphus was that probably Greek, maybe Roman, but he was trying to push a rock, an unbearably big rock, trying to push it up the side of a hill. And he would devote all of his energy to pushing and not giving up and not giving up. And he almost made it. And he almost made it he got to the top of the hill, and he was so exhausted that there was no place to put that heavy rock that he had been pushing and bearing. And so when he got it to the top, it rolled and rolled and rolled all the way back to the bottom. And Sisyphus' life was endlessly trying to get that rock from the bottom to the top. That's what the pain is like of being a trauma survivor. When, I speak for me, when I would have happy days and happy free times, I ran, I swam, I biked, I explored. I was an explorer. That was probably my archetype. I just kept hunting and learning and hunting. How did this river flow? How did this stream make it over the rocks? If I changed the way the rocks were constructed in the creek, what would that do to the creek? Same thing in life. If I changed the way the barriers inside of me were put together, how would that affect me? Well, hugely. So there I was, off learning all the time and fascinated by it. And also, I would always go home. And here's the problem, I would always go home to agony. I could never feel safe when I walked through the door at 12 Orchard Drive, South Corning, New York. Why? Because my mother, beautiful, beautiful woman with Bunsen burner blue eyes. And if you remember Bunsen burners back in the old chemistry classes in the 40s and 50s, maybe 60s, was such a blue flame. The gas created such a blue flame. And that was my mother's color of her eyes. They were beautiful. I spent a lot of time with her, looking at her and reading her eyes, because in her eyes I could tell, was my mother sane or insane? I didn't know those terms, but I read her eyes and I knew if she was going away. And when she went away, which meant she started leaving the kitchen, leaving her body, leaving her soul, when she started going away, it was, I didn't know until I was an adult what caused it, but there was something that possessed her. That's the 19th century word, isn't it? Possessed by demons. There was something that overtook her. It took her out of herself, and she floated and didn't know who she was, but she floated into what I later learned was called purgatory. Purgatory is that horrible place no one wants to be in when you can't make it to the landing where everybody wants to be. You can't make it to heaven or nirvana because you don't quite deserve to be there. But you don't always deserve to be in Hades or hell either, because you've done some good things. Notice these judgments. Good get you to heaven, bad get you to hell. Hard work gets you toward heaven, but can't guarantee you're going to get in. Living a good life builds you up indulgences. That's the Catholic term. Got these indulgences so that you can, when you get to the pearly gates, those shimmering gates of heaven, you can say, well, I did this and just again, when I made a mistake, I apologize. And when I made a mistake, I made amends. All this like checklist stuff. That's the way our lives went. And so I watched my mother, and when the checklist went away, she wasn't drinking coffee. She wasn't cleaning the stove. She wasn't cleaning the floor. My mother's way of keeping herself busy was to clean the house every day. It's a skill that she learned from her mother. Neither of these women went to school much. Women were beautiful and they didn't need education, right? Well, yeah, we need education so we can know what our options are. That's a simple way to put it. I need education so I can know I'm not alone on earth. I need education so I can discover how other people have faced the same dilemmas. I need education so I can break out of the limitation that either has been put upon me or I've put on myself. So I would watch my mother, and I would watch her leave her body. And it got worse and worse, because first she went away and then she went to a place that was terrifying. It must have been terrifying to her. Remember, you can go to, if I say something is trouble, you can go to, I probably need to complete that thought. You can go in your iPhone or any place online, just go to warm lines for trauma warm lines, and you will find in your area, if not in your state, in a nearby state, a number you can call and sometimes text to get help if you're having a hard time as a trauma survivor. Hard time is a euphemism for what? Well, it means if my brain is locking down. When my brain locks down, I get very afraid that I'm not safe because I wasn't safe as a child. When my brain locks down, I get also terrified that I don't have capacity to think things through. And I don't, because literally the brain, the smart part of the brain, the part of the brain that gives us perspective, and perspective is helpful, that shuts down. It's called the executive function, prefrontal cortex functioning. Shuts down by 90 to 95%. I feel that. So when we shut down and we're trauma survivors, and this must have been what had happened with my mother, when she shut down, she was like, oh my God, do I exist? Will anyone take care of me? I am alone on earth. No one cares about me. No one wants me. I am totally prey for anyone that would come along. And I'm convinced that my mother, like me, had a father that was a lurking predator. No one talked about it, but in my family, men stalking and abusing, capturing and abusing women, physically beating us or sexually abusing us, that was acceptable. And I'm sure there are things more terrifying, but I think of slavery and I think of women, fathers having their children ripped away from them and sold. I think of partners having their partner ripped away from them and sold. And it felt like I was being ripped away from myself. I don't know if I ever felt precious, but I certainly felt like I had a place on earth and I was going to find it. I had a place on earth and I was going to find it. I feel like every trauma surviving child, someplace inside knows. And I ask you, if you're a trauma survivor, do you know inside of yourself someplace you have worth? You know, my friend Denise is out there today helping little kids in the school understand about how monarch butterflies turn into these glorious, how these eggs turn into caterpillars and how the caterpillars turn into, there's like go black, go invisible for a second, turn into these beautiful creatures of the sky that waft up and they travel for miles. How is that possible? And that's the question that Denise is raising with the children. How is it possible that you, when you're a little tiny thing and you can't move and you're kind of like a little chubby thing, how can you evolve and stretch and eat and grow and move until at one point there's no choice? There's no choice but to go into the cocoon and create a space around you where within I will evolve. You will evolve into who you're meant to be. And that chrysalis, if you've watched it, it's akimbo. It doesn't have a like steady beat. It's akimbo, the movement to break free. My friend, Dr. Deborah Bernetta Sullivan, with whom I wrote with two other people, Janet Gonzalez Mena and Luis Hernandez, we wrote a book called Learning from the Bumps in the Road. And boy, when that chrysalis is trying to escape, the butterfly is trying to form itself. Deborah used to say, it's really gooey in there. It's a mess in there. Gotta be a mess in there. How does that happen? And so how do we inside of ourselves, we who were told you're nothing, you don't exist, I don't want you. Your job is to please me. Your job is to be my supply. My father was a narcissist. Narcissists hold hostages. Narcissists have supply. So I was supply. I wasn't a person to him. He was not interested, fascinated by any. I learned not to ask him questions. I wanted to know about the gyroscope. The man was a Cornell engineer. I knew he wouldn't care. But I cared. And the worst time for me as a trauma survivor was when I stopped caring. When the abuse became so great that I stopped feeling I had anything to live for because there was just going to be more abuse. All of these patterns of feeling worthless, not being seen, having no one interested to ask, who are you and what do you want to be? Or how do you feel about that? Feelings? I had no idea what a feeling was. We didn't talk about feelings. We followed the rule articulated by Dr. Claudia Black, trauma surviving kids. Don't you dare talk. Don't talk. Don't trust. Don't you trust anybody. And don't feel, because if you don't have feelings, then you won't emit any indications to anybody that you might be in danger or that you need something. That's the thing. I was so embarrassed about being needy. Oh my goodness, I was 60 something years old, 68 years old, and working with a really good trauma therapist, Dr. Bernard Gray, who may or may not still be on earth, I don't know. But there were times when I would feel needy, and I was so embarrassed about feeling needy. And one of the things I need to do as a trauma survivor is to stop being needless and wantless. And in fact, to be able to feel, experience, and share my need. Here's an example. Example of what, Holly, Elisa? An example of what it's like for a child to be raised to have no needs. I don't want to hear your needs. And if that was threatening, I'm sorry, but the threats were there. They were always there. The instruments with which to be harmed, or the body, part of the body that would harm, not love and hug. So it was easier to just let go of having needs and wants. If I didn't ache for something, then it wouldn't hurt so badly. But my whole life, until I was about 70 years old, I think, I ached for my father. Not in this sexually abusive way, but I ached in the classic literary way of I needed a father. I needed someone to help me form myself. I needed someone to protect me enough so that I could explore freely. I did that for myself. And I wasn't able to stop many of the forces that came in on me. I needed to have someone besides myself arguing for myself. I was pretty good at playing golf. I was a kinesthetic learner. I was an athlete. And I wanted to play golf on the golf team. I thought, well, that's where I can learn to play. I'm just out there picking up tips, but I'm pretty good. I'm not great, but I'm pretty good. Maybe I could be good. And I went to Mr. John Hive, the assistant principal of Corning Free Academy in Corning, New York. And whenever I'm just revealing facts, I can do that. That's the fear that says, are you going to get in trouble for saying this? Well, no, because it's a fact. I went to John Hive, who had already, since 7th grade, been abusive to me. I knew him as an abusive man, but I didn't know the systems of abuse at that point. I just thought that there were evil, cruel, bad individuals that would come in and hurt, and they would hurt children. And I had to protect myself from them. And so I used the tools that I had. So with John Hive, who was the vice principal when I was in what we used to call junior high school, one of my teachers didn't give me an A. And if I didn't get all A's, in fact, A pluses, I didn't want to go home because it was going to be tragic what was going to happen. Disdain at the least, abuse, punishment, beating. These were the things that could happen for being a disappointment to my father, for not bringing honor to him. So John Hive, I learned, I don't know, I was like 12, 13 years old. I learned this. I had handed in a paper to Miss at that point, Corwin, English teacher, my study room teacher. I had handed a paper into her. I got an A on it. When I got my grades back, she gave me a B or a B plus, and I didn't understand because I had all my papers saved. And I knew that I'd gotten every paper in. I could do that. But I went up to her and I said, Miss Corwin, you gave me a B plus, but all of my papers were A or A plus. I don't even know if I got an A minus, but she said, no, you didn't hand in the paper on. I said, oh no, I did. No, you didn't. Yes, I did. And I said, I'll prove it. She said, you come back at noon and I'll have Mr. Hyde here. And I guess I didn't know him then, so I didn't know what a threat it was. But I said, okay, I'll come back. I went back to my desk. I looked through all of my English papers and I found the paper she said that I didn't do and therefore got a 0 on. And that took me down, like all those papers, it took it down to a B, or God forbid I got a C. That would be death right there. Anyway, I went back at noon. I wasn't even afraid because I had the proof. Logically, I was all set. And there was Mr. Hyde, and this is like, come on, like this is decades ago. He sat on the right and she sat behind her desk. So the two of them, she behind her desk, he on her left, which was my right. And I came in as if I were on trial. And what do you have to say for yourself? Which is like, shut up. It wasn't like, just give me, let's look at this objectively. No, it was your judge to begin with. But I didn't know that because I thought I had the facts of proof. So I said, look, I have the paper here, right here. And here's the grade that she gave me. And here's the date. And here's the topic. And so, yes, I did the paper. Yes, I got that grade. Would you please now consider? I don't even think I said consider. Would you please redo my grade? And she looked angry with me. I guess I wasn't submitting to her or something. Her authority. I was challenging her authority. And so Mr. Hyde stepped in and he looked at me. This is like 7 decades ago. No, 6 decades ago. A lot of years have gone by. The man died. Apparently, he went off the road. Word is that he drank. I wouldn't be surprised. He often had this really red face. And he was a sadistic man in my experience. I'm just talking about my experience. Maybe other people loved him. I think males liked him better than females because what happened when I asked him if I could be on the golf team, if I could try it, if I could try out, he laughed. What do you think? What? Who do you think you are? Why do you think a girl should be on the golf team? Well, I did. He laughed. That kind of disdain goes deep. In he came. He sat beside her, seated at the left-hand side of Miss Corwin. He said, you don't get it. I support my teachers no matter what. I didn't know what he was talking about. I support my teachers no matter what. Yeah, doesn't matter whether you handed them that paper or not. The teacher's right. And you need to learn that the teacher is right, no matter what. And the teacher will have my support, no matter what. No matter what. No matter whether you can prove the injustice or not. The injustice will be upheld because those of us in power will hold on to the power and use it arbitrarily and capriciously. No wonder I went to law school. But there was John Hyde. And later on, when I dealt with him, take this down, just let it be. Later on, when I dealt with him, he would do one thing after another that was in cahoots, in collaboration, in, what do they call it in the law? I was a criminal law person too. It'll come, or it won't. Probably will come when collaborating with someone who's doing wrong, being a cohort of someone who's doing wrong. You guys are probably coming up with word. When you do that, you're an accomplice. That's it. So I would get called in for something going on, and a bunch of us were doing it. For example, there was a sorority ritual, and we all had to stand up and get stuff put on us. And, rituals for sororities back and fraternities back in the day, as Charles Blow from the New York Times has written, they are abusive, and they can be physically abusive and violent. So those of us pledging the sorority, whatever the name of it was, we had to get pepper poured over us, orange juice poured over us. I mean, it was really a mess. And we were doing this in public because, of course, that's part of the shaming, right? Public shaming. I was out there and we had to sing these songs, and we got called on. We had to recite something. And I was in a line of like 12 girls. We were all doing it. When we came back in the building, I heard my name over the PA system. It's trouble when your name comes over the PA system, unless you're a certain privileged kid and everybody knows, well, this kid's going to get an award for something or going to be asked to do something special. But I walked in and announcements were made, and Mr. Hodge said, and would Holly Bruner come to the vice principal's office? Everybody's looking at me. Nobody's laughing. I went. And it was, again, the same thing. It doesn't matter that you were doing something acceptable for years and years at this school, that you were doing something that 11 other girls were doing, that you were doing something that the school has looked upon as, we'll kind of look over it. The thing that both of your older sisters did, that doesn't matter. I didn't like what you were doing. And I said, look, these are the initiation rites. I don't have a say over the initiation rites. I felt that my job was to be a good sport. Isn't that it? Be a good sport, not complain, do what I had to do. He said, well, it doesn't matter. Here we go. You don't get it, do you? It doesn't matter because I've already called your father. And as he told me that, there was a look in his eye of sadism that I often saw in my father's eye, a look of sadism. And the sadism was, it doesn't matter, right or wrong. It doesn't matter if you've got logic behind you. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because I am the man in charge, and I will make sure you are beaten. He knew the code. The code was, I've called your father. That meant to me, I didn't want to go home. I couldn't go anywhere else, but I didn't want to go home because I would be beaten. I would be shamed. I would be punished. I would be whatever bad way my father was in when he got home from work that night. He would punish the bejesus out of me for failing. And worse than that, public shame. In both of my cultures, we were supposed to be underneath the radar for anything that was unacceptable. So we couldn't do anything unacceptable. The acceptable things we got to be above the radar. Okay, I could be on Dean's list. Okay, I could get an award. But that was it. I couldn't go from getting an award or being on Dean's list or accomplishing something. I couldn't go from there to feeling good about it. Because the cost of being a trauma surviving child is to feel awful about ourselves and to accept our powerlessness and to accept the abuse. Now, there's the message, my friends. To be a traumatized child is two things. It's the Sisyphus of knowing no matter how hard we work, how much we keep silent, how much we don't bother, we have no needs, we're wantless. No matter how high we push the stone to get to the top of the mountain, it will always roll back. We're always powerless to ever feel joy because we're never good enough inside. My suggestion, as I would say as an attorney, my argument to you today is that we do have meaning and purpose inside. I'm loving these dragonfly earrings that Lizzie Farley made for me. She's in Vermont and New Orleans. I told her I love dragonflies. Look what she made. It's so wonderful. Anyway, and I told her I'd have movement. So these guys have got movement. I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay. So the two choices for the pain inside. I hope I was clear about this. I hope you're with me. What I talked about in the beginning is about being a trauma survivor. And even if we have joy and happiness on the outside, I carried it with me, and I carry it to this day. The fear, the judgment, the cruel expectation, as my family's motto went, we can't be happy and you can't be happy either. No one ever articulated that to me. They articulated things like grin and bear it, be ladylike. No one wants to see a frown on your face. Put a smile on your face. I still get messages from people, inadvertent ones on social media saying, just smile, just put a smile on your face. Because that's what little girls were taught. Little boys, I'm sure, were taught to buck up in that way or in other ways too. We don't want to see a child that looks disappointed, because that might mean you got needs and you have no right to have a need. And so inside of ourselves, I carried a burden of sadness. Tony A., who wrote a book called The Laundry List, it's the list of traits that we have as traumatized children, like fear of authority figures, the need to people please, the need to not advocate for ourselves because it's better to feel guilty. It's just better to feel guilty. All of those convoluted ways in which children are taught not to love and respect ourselves were the trauma. That was what trauma added up to for a child who is a survivor of trauma. And I ask you, in the trauma that you faced, either as a child or as an adult, there are differences in terms of the brain, but trauma does the same thing to everybody. It addles my brain I'm smiling because there's still hope here. Trauma addles my brain into this frozen place of terror. And that's what trauma survivors are running from the rest of our lives. We run from the terror that's inside of us because our brain froze just at that point where something was about to kill us. Now, who wants to be in that purgatory of always fearing we're going to be wounded and harmed and killed? That's what we wanted to escape from. So we used escape through Sisyphus. What was he doing? He was achieving, but he could never really allow himself to feel good about it. He always got to the top and just had to start again. So there's one trauma survivor's message: you'll never make it. You got to work hard. Work your fingers to the bone. What do you get? Bony fingers. But you got to do. Because if you're busy working, you see people in the grocery store saying, how are you doing? Oh, keep them busy. Work addiction is our one acceptable addiction. So if we're busy all the time, then we don't go into the sadness and despair that we can never find joy, that we can never feel good about ourselves, that we can never achieve the being loved and the loving. This is taking me a lifetime of choiceful decision-making to say, I have a right to be lovable. I'm 78 and a half. And for the first time, I look in the mirror and I think, that's an attractive woman. I was a model in my early 20s. I would look in the mirror and I wouldn't see attractive. I would see what my father saw. Pray. I would see what other men saw. Stick body, stick body. I was like a Twiggy. No hourglass figure with me. So I never felt attractive. Going down the runway with my capes and my boots and my long hair, oh, I felt empowered. But I knew I was, the word is grandiose. I knew I was just an actor, not I was like just reacting. I was just doing what I needed to do to strut. It wasn't real, but I made myself appear like I was just a floating, moving, stylish woman, young woman going down the runway. I remember one time coming in and I'd had a pretty, how can I say, lavish night out with drinking and to say it, I inhaled drugging. And I was going to model the next morning. And I got in, I was like really weary. And the makeup people and the hair people looked at the woman who hired me, said, "What are we going to do with her?" And she said, she's all right. She's to just do it. They took my long hair. And even before Steven Spielberg ever conceived of Princess Leia with her braids, that's what they did with me. Pulled my hair tight, did the braids on the side. They came out here now like black girls do black girl puffs. I think it's really cool. Well, these were my braids, my Princess Leia stuff. It looked really dramatic and cool. And I was wearing I didn't get the frilly stuff. I got the sort of avant-garde stuff to wear, and I loved it. And then they put makeup on me. I knew the makeup wasn't me. The hair was me, but it wasn't anything I knew how to do. I still don't know how to do much with his hair, but I could learn, and I'll ask. And I am learning a few things. Anyway, I felt like that was fake. So I never felt I was attractive. It has taken me choices like, yes, I can have purple, blue, fuchsia hair. Yes, I can. Yes, I can let the gray grow with the purple fuchsia hair. Yes, I can do my eyebrows the way I want to. Go to eyebrow booker people, they do this wax thing and they make everything perfectly even and thin. Well, eyebrows are getting thick. I like that the way they are. And I like the way that they have all these shapes. So what am I doing here? I'm doing something that I was forbidden to do. Were you taught not to ever talk about yourself? Were you taught to always help other people talk about themselves? Were you taught to not find yourself attractive? That was a sin. The sin of pride. Boy, that was an evil sin. Okay. So, yeah, I didn't. I'm sad I didn't tell my children stories about me. Most of the males I knew, not all, but most of the males I knew had stories about themselves that they would just tell over and over again. And the stories were thin veils and I was smart, or I was brave, or I was a bully. Nobody messed with me. But I didn't tell my stories because I didn't have a me. I wasn't supposed to be me, so I didn't have a whole mythology. It's only for 36 years of going to meetings of trauma survivors, whether those survivors were in the form of adult children of alcoholics, or people from alcoholic families, or people who were codependent. There are a lot of 12-step groups for trauma survivors that just have different names. They're named after what we used to survive, but they don't get named after the root cause of using. Alcoholics Anonymous helped many people, many desperate people back in the day, helped them put down, and that's the phrase, the drink. But watch people who have been in and put down the drink for decades often say, there's something missing. Taking my inventory, looking at what's wrong with me and working to rid myself of that. That's not enough. Well, it was never enough for me because asked to take my inventory, there's a 4-step that says we made a list. Oh, no, that's a 9-step, 8-step, whatever. There's a 4-step that say we took a fearless and moralist moralist, fearless moral inventory of ourselves. We listed all of our wrongs. Honey, I listed page after page after page of all the things that I was inadequate, wrong about, had failed to do, because that was my self definition. But ask me about my strengths. Those I would have a real hard time saying because it was a sin of pride. Sin of pride. So I now work in this format of steps. They are 12 steps, and the 12 steps they include, rather than taking a moral inventory of myself, I take a fearless inventory of my parents, because in essence, I had become them. It's not to judge them. It's not to say they were the cause. That's not, because blaming somebody else never works. I need to take responsibility for myself and ask to learn how to ask for help. But this fearless and searching moral inventory of my parents meant if I could understand why my mother would go away, why she wasn't what she appeared to be when she was in public, why she was desperate much of the time, why she had so little confidence but acted. I mean, she had such a closet full of clothes. I do too. I love me some clothes. What was she doing? Covering up? Or maybe trying to reveal in an acceptable way who she was. Who am I? The wearer of the dragonflies. Who am I? The wearer of the wonderful Chinese jacket that pulls the color purple out of my hair. I lost my train there. And I just wanted to say that out loud because what I learned for years was to cover up when I lost my train of thinking, what was the direction there? But the thing, and I guess to make fun of myself, like just laugh, having a craft moment, can't remember a thing, senior moments people have. That often happens either when our brains get tired, and our brains get tired every hour, and it's almost an hour now, or when our brains shut down out of fear. I think it was Roy Baumeister that I interviewed who'd done research on this. He was at University of Florida, perhaps. And he said our brains just need breaks about every hour. And if we don't give ourselves a break every hour, our brains will rest anyway. So my brain just rested, and that's okay. But because I was raised in an either or world, in a good, bad, sinner, saint world, I didn't have that option. It doesn't matter. You don't get it. You're always going to be judged. There's always going to be someone to punish you. That was the message I got as a trauma survivor. And I didn't see much way out. Of course, every traumatized child wants to escape. Physical escape, my best plan was to get the hell out of Dodge. But there was no way in the 1940s and 1950s to get out, not even the 1960s, although I checked in the 60s. Down really for hundreds of miles. I hitchhiked, probably not safe. But I didn't think I was valued that much. So what if I got in a car with a man and he drove miles and miles? Fortunately, I didn't get raped or attacked, fortunately. But I was a throwaway adult because I was a throwaway child. Anyway, what happens to a child that learns she's worthless, that she can't talk, that she has no identity, is that inside of the child, we sometimes give up, and that's the worst. And when I gave up, and it was so bad, I was the only one of the three daughters left at home, and it was so bad. My mother was having what they call a breakdown. My father was in his still attractive man in his 50s or 60s or something. 50s, I guess. Needed a sexual partner. And here I was, this lithesome, probably very attractive, didn't know it, teenager. And he felt he had the right to me. And I had to shut all that down. Didn't happen, daughter. That's what he would say to me. It didn't happen, daughter. You didn't see that, daughter. So the rest of my time has been going back to the place deeply inside of me, deeply beneath the shame, beneath the abuse, beneath the shutting down of the brain, to the deeply spiritual part of myself that I still believe in. My soul. My soul. What is a soul? And the first thing I went to is I look up to that at the old trees right outside my second floor window here. The trees are always in touch. They're always communicating. This is proven now. Always knew it. Children that live outdoors know it. When trees are cut down, they were cut down the first day of the COVID shutdown. I felt them grieving. I didn't know what was going on. I heard this chainsaws. I didn't know where they're coming from. The property next door, which had been forever wild, it's a phrase from Maine. Percival Baxter said that there would be a place in Maine forever wild. Well, this looked forever wild. These tall, tall trees and green, and bears and everything out there. They were being cut down to build an apartment building. It hurt. I could feel the trees crying. Call me crazy. I don't care, because I know that deep inside of me is the part that identifies with everything else alive. And perhaps when I die and I no longer have, what did Emerson called it? My soul joins the oversoul. That's what he called God, the oversoul, kind of like that. What I want to say to you, though, is the second myth that really describes the pain of the abused child or the traumatized adult is Prometheus. Prometheus is the one who gave light to human beings. He was punished for that. That was a special trait of the gods, only the higher ups, only the privileged, only the arbitrary and capricious people in power, beings in power, only they would have light. And who was this Prometheus who gave light to the people? Punished the rest of his life. Taken up to the Caucasus Mountains, way up northern Italy, past the Dolomites, taken up there, chained to an outcropping of the rock, chained, and exposed his liver. What pain to have one of your organs like raw out there. And the carrion birds, not even the stunning, beautiful birds, but the carrion birds would come and pick away and devour the liver. And then every night, when the sun set, when the light went away that he had given away, when the light went away, what happened to Prometheus? He was taken down, and his liver would regrow, and he would again overnight get this promise, this hope. It would come back, this hope. But when the light came back and he was forbidden, the torture began. He was again chained. And then there's Joan of Arc. If you ever get a chance, if you have courage to watch the silent version of Joan of Arc done in 1918 or something with this fabulous Italian cast. The woman who played Joan was somebody like Aya Cola or something like that. I'll have to look her up. I'll choose to look her up. She, without words, with her eyes, with her face, with her body, showed what it was like to do the right thing and be killed for it. The messenger gets shot. Trauma survivors are messengers. Maybe I'll end with this. Trauma survivors are messengers. We know what's not the truth, which means we know what is the truth. We know when injustice is done, and we know how to set it right. We know some of how to set it right. We know we can't do it ourselves, even though we're taught, be all things to all people. We know to claim the humility to ask for help. That's what I do in these programs. I share my experience. I share my strength. I share my hope. I share my dream of living fully with you through it, being as honest as I can, and hope that as I'm honest with you, that the truth will set us free. Are there truths that you have that are hard to say? Are there truths that you have that no one wanted to hear? Are there truths that you keep silent about because you're not allowed to tell those secrets? My friends, secrets kill. The telling of the secrets means the worst punishment. It means being excluded. It means being banished. It means being banned. I am not accepted by many people in my family because I have said I'm a trauma survivor. I'm not supposed to do that. I'm supposed to defend, protect, and always raise up like a god my sadistic, narcissistic father. Well, I did that for years, and I got sick doing it because the truth that set me free was he could never see me. And when I got it, he could never love me, never see me, never have an interest in me. Instead, he would always shame me until the last act in his life told me it was time to do a sexual act with him. This is 100-year-old man telling me that. And I said from the core of my soul, I said, no, 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 I will not. And that was the change in my life when I realized and could say out loud, I am no longer my father's daughter. I am no longer defined as a child who wanted to get the approval, the recognition, the love of somebody from the outside in. I am the person who now chooses to believe her own story. And in believing my story, that truth sets me free. My friends, thank you for being with me. I was about to say, thanks for dealing with my mind going all over the place. If you've studied Jungian stuff, or even if not, stream of consciousness, some of us are very intuitive and our brains just go from one thought to another. That's how my brain works. I'm intuitive. I'm not concrete down to earth, but I can be if I have to be. I didn't want to do that this time. I just wanted to let it flow. So my request to you is to reflect upon anything you've heard and ask yourself, were you allowed to be your true self? Did you have someone in your corner who said, you are special? Did you have someone who saw you as you were and encouraged you to be more of yourself? Or if, like me and many trauma survivors, there wasn't really anybody there except that extraordinary person who came when needed every so often. They came. Dr. Nell Smither said to me, you can write. Michael Conta said to me in 6th grade, I'm not surprised. Your paper was the best of all the best students. I'm not surprised. William Munsey said to me, you're very bright, you're very quick, you're very funny, you're very resourceful, but there's an anxiety to you. What's going on? There must be something else. It was enough in that moment for him to say that to me. I can picture the room and the light coming through the windows when he said that to me. So, my friends, trauma survivors can be defined by trauma, and I was, and I still can be. And we can choose. And this is my choice. And I invite you, I applaud you wherever you are in the journey, from saying, I can't do it, to maybe I can do it, to I've tried it, it didn't work, to I'm going to try something else, to I'm going to ask for help, to I feel awful, I'll never be able to do this, to, oh my God, I've done it. If I did it once, maybe I can do it again. Maybe I can write about it, as in my book. Maybe I can talk about it, as in my keynotes. Maybe I can offer hope, the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the song without words and never, never stops at all. My friends, thank you for joining me. The truth does set the trauma survivor free. And I invite you to reflect on anything that will help you in your journey or help you in your journey working with people who are traumatized. When you look at it that way, we all have traumatized people in our lives, ourselves, the people around us, or those of us who work with traumatized people. We pick that up. We get secondary trauma. So what is this all about? It's about feeling the feelings. It's about facing the facts. It's about coming out of denial. It's about stopping lying to myself. It's also about seeing the light that was always there, the promise that's always there. I'll close with this. Living in America the last month has been really traumatizing, really traumatizing. Not only have we had violence, we've had horrible things said, we've had horrible things predicted. You won't have to vote again. We're done. This will be your last time as an American voting. I'll put together concentration camps. Now, people support this man. To him, that's right. People need to go into concentration camps. Well, I'd be one of those people, or the people that I respect would be one of those people going into concentration camps. There have been, and then there was allegedly an assassination attempt on, and for centuries, trauma survivors, people of color, same thing, have continuously been sacrificed, shot, hung, Emmett Till. Now we take our hope and we don't give up. And John Lewis tells us, be good troublemakers. So let's go forward with that, my friends. Take your broken heart, turn it into art, and join Denise and me next Monday, East Coast US, 3 o'clock, 8 o'clock London, India. Hey, it could be midnight, but these are always recorded. So join us to get free from being stuck as trauma survivors and to transition as a beautiful caterpillar transitions into a butterfly. So I shall see you the next time. Fairly well. Thanks for being here. I can do this. I can do this. I can find a way to turn this off. How about up here? How about here? Right here. Okay.